Hello, thank you for joining us for our final panel of our Careers Ed Day. We've had four panels today, and finishing things off with a conversation about indie beauty. We're going to be coming at it from a few different angles. I'll be asking questions to the lovely brand founders on the stage about how they have succeeded as brand founders, but also what they're looking for prospective employees. So, kind of coming at this from two angles. So, thank you so much to our panelists for agreeing to donate your time on a Sunday. Brianne, is it still Sunday or is it Monday? I think it's Monday for you.
It's Monday for me.
It's
Monday morning.
Monday. The time change is confusing, but we're going to get this started with introductions for each of the panelists. So for each of you, would you mind introducing who you are, the brands you've launched, and I guess what you're working on, if it's anything different? And Brianne, would you like to go first?
So my name is Brienne West, and I'm the founder of a company called Ethique, which is spelled Ethique and is French for ethical. So about 9 years ago, I had this burning desire to create a company that rid the world of plastic bottles, but also proved to everybody and to other businesses that it was possible to operate as ethically and as sustainably as humanly possible. So we are a regenerative beauty brand, and everything we do we seek to create really impactful, efficacious products, lead with, without the marketing fear and propaganda that is around, but also to do it, we're leaving the lightest possible trace on the planet.
Jen, would you like to go next?
Sure. I'm Jen Harper, the founder and CEO at Cheekbone Beauty Cosmetics Inc. I started the brand in 2016, just with zero experience in the beauty space. So I came at this from a completely different view. I was entered the industry to highlight really Indigenous faces and bring representation to the beauty space, which I had never seen before, and really not in any industry or mainstream big brand marketing where Indigenous people felt like they had a place. And so our mission and vision is helping every Indigenous kid on the planet see and feel their value in the world while we craft sustainable color cosmetics. Just celebrating 5 years a couple weeks ago. It's really incredible when I think back and having just such a naive view of the space from when I started to where we are now, and have learned so much. And then once I entered the industry, just realizing how much and a possibility there was for actual change when it comes to how products are made and created, and really combining my Anishinaabe roots or my Indigenous ancestry into the brand and into how we make and create products. I truly believe that Indigenous people are the OGs of sustainability, and it's our communities that have been doing this work for thousands and thousands of years. And so just thinking about how we can marry that idea with Western science, Indigenous wisdom, and Western science. And so as an indie brand, we actually built a lab this year, and we employ full-time chemists and work with sustainability experts and just trying to figure this out and how to do it in this really authentic, transparent way where we're being really, really honest with our community and our customers about how things are done in the industry. It's such, now that I'm here, it's incredibly secretive, everything that happens, where I'm just a giant big mouth and want to talk about all the things and everything. And I feel like that is just a better way to teach our customers, because there's so much confusion that happens in this space. And so really being just open and honest with our audience of how and why we've made so many changes, because our brand has completely transformed into the type of products that we bring into the world. And so we still are based on that, and our foundation has never changed, that mission to empower Indigenous youth through representation. And then now we work so hard to leave as much of an impact on the planet as possible.
And then last but not least, Suveen.
Hi, Jen. This is Suveen. I'm the co-founder and CEO of K18 here. Just like Jen, I've not been in the beauty industry. I was in the tech space for the last about 10 years. And I was introduced to hair care by my wife and co-founder. Her name is Britta. She's the founder of Arquis. And the part that really kind of fascinated me, my point of entry into hair care was that when you kind of look at the industry, it's such a huge industry, and like the number of products out there are simply overwhelming. Well, I mean, what I kind of see is that the amount of money, the amount of time, the amount of products that women, men, and they, everyone kind of uses to kind of express their hair is huge. And two things that everyone wants is more time and more money. And the one thing that they kind of need is less. Yet when you kind of look at hair care, everything has had a genesis, its genesis in cosmetic chemistry, and which is only made for very needy hair. It's needy for your attention. It's needy for products, and that's not a very sustainable path. So that's why we kind of looked at biotech as a means of kind of a really kind of a creating a more sustainable way of hair care. Launched K18 at the height of the pandemic in just around in December 2020, so just less than a year. And in this year, we already kind of launched a brand in about 50 countries. And for the first time, you have a product that's kind of truly universal and works across all hair types and generations. And that's been super gratifying for us as we kind of set about our journey in the world of hair care.
And now, for each of you, could you describe what you do in your career today? So, what you do on a day to day? What's a week in the life for each of you? What does that look like, or a day to day? Brianne, would you like to start this one again?
Sure. I'm sure for the three of us, it's relatively similar in that there is no such thing as a standard day. I spend an awful lot of time answering emails and meetings, but it's, I guess, because we are still a relatively small team. We've gone from 8 team members last year to 25 this year, but we're still all wearing quite a few different hats. So I'm in charge of strategic marketing. I'm technically the CEO, but again, wear lots of hats. I also do a lot of the product development. So on a day-to-day, perhaps I'll go and spend an hour or two in the lab with our R&D chemists, working on packaging, having some, at the moment we're knee deep in budgets and planning for next year, which is not a typical day, but that's what we're bogged down in at the moment. And it's hard. I actually get this question a lot, and I find it really hard to answer because there is no standard day. The things I enjoy the most are hanging out and developing new products, and working with the marketing team to how to get that across to people. And then I do a lot of the ingredient sourcing, because a big part of ours is the fair and direct trade side of things. So we find new ingredients and understand the community that produce them. Yeah, that's sort of a very rambly answer, really.
Jen, would you like to go next?
Yeah, it's probably very similar when you're a small team and still really considered a startup. You're pretty much doing all of the things every single day, and then who knows what the next day brings. Our brand has gained a lot of, I guess, media attention, and so we're constantly doing those kinds of engagements, which as a small brand we never say no to, because that brings new community members to our circle. And so we're always doing something like that every single week. And for me, it's at this point, it's spending as much time on as I possibly can. And I wish I had more time in product development, but that's where the focus of most of my time goes. Again, that sourcing ingredients, working with our chemists to think about what we're making next, and just finding and trying to source as many incredible, things as humanly possible. We actually are working on a raw ingredient ourselves with a project at the moment where, because we're in the Niagara region in Canada, we have it's a fruit belt region. And so we're working on a project where we're actually taking waste from our fruit region and pulling actives from that right now with a local university, which is really, really exciting. And then I spend a ton of time with our marketing team as much as possible. Trying to figure out how to just get more attention, which is really hard in the digital space right now. I don't know about any other small brands, but we've really suffered this past year just in gaining that attention that we once had online pre-2020 or pandemic. And a focus on building the team and trying to create it. I found as the leader, that's probably been the hardest thing that I have to do, is find the right people to sit in the right spots, to do the right jobs, to help the company grow. And so that's where, unfortunately, was just not my favorite part, as well as financials. But I have an incredible CFO, so I don't usually have to worry about that. He that's his focus, and that would drain my creativity. So I choose not to spend as much time there. I just want to make sure that all the numbers are working out. If I see that in the spreadsheet he sends me every Monday morning, then I'm happy. And it's and then it's that people portion. So just, right now we're spending a lot of time where we think we finally have the right QAC person to come on board, and that's been like half a year just trying to fill one role. So that's where we're challenged. But yeah, it's a lot of things all the time, juggling. It never ends. As the founder and owner of the company and current acting CEO, then I feel like this is just my life 24/7.
And last but not least, Suveen.
Like Brianna and Jen kind of said, for a co-founder and a CEO, there's nothing like a fixed day and a fixed set of routines. Every day, when I kind of look at my role, I think the first and foremost is how do you kind of fuel the passion of your team and kind of mitigate the bottlenecks. I personally believe less is more for us as a brand and for our community and for the planet. So that kind of essentially kind of morphs into how do you kind of look at one single North Star, which actually kind of builds up your brand and your community. And that's where, for example, in our case, the stylists are a part of are an integral part of our community. They are our advocates. They have this deep relationship with the community out. So how do we kind of really fuel their expression and their creativity? And that's where we all kind of look at collectively as a team. So with the team, as when you're kind of a small company and you kind of rapidly kind of growing, we grew from about 20 people to about 50 people within about 12 months. Now, there are hundreds of ideas. There are multiple things that you know things and multiple priorities that you deal with on a daily basis. How do you kind of actually kind of bring this down to one North Star and the one that is the biggest outcome? And that's kind of where I kind of see my biggest role. How do you kind of keep ourselves on track towards the North Star that that really helps us kind of drive the maximum outcome? Because otherwise we kind of just kind of lost in tasks. The other part of my role is managing stakeholders and manage growth financing. Uh, you we are in the midst of a Series C financing closing, not the easiest thing to do, and managing current stakeholders and interacting with some of the top kind of private equity funds in the industry. And bringing them on board and exciting them about our vision is a key part of my kind of a role. The third part is uh, how do we kind of have fun as a team? Every day can be stressful. Otherwise, it has to be less about the the work. I mean, the only way we can kind of manage when you're kind of working 12 to 15 hours a day, it has to be passion that drives it. So passion, ownership. So how do we kind of really flow as an organization, drive substantial amount of passion and ownership at every level? And when we kind of do that, suddenly kind of the work kind of seems a lot more fun than it would be otherwise. So that's a third part of my kind of a role, which is really kind of seeing how we kind of continue to kind of fuel that passion within ourselves and build up the skills that can kind of really kind of drive the outcomes in the team. And finally, I also kind of behave as a CFO for the organization. It's a substantial amount of reporting, monthly data, analyzing, and work with that so that on a monthly basis, our stakeholders are completely synced up with what the team is doing and how we kind of are making impact in our business and community.
Now, each of you guys have quite successful brands. So I'd be really interested in each of your perspectives here. Was there anything like crucial when you were building your brand that has led to your success? Um, is there anything that you did prior to even brainstorming for your brand that you think was really important? Like, was there any kind of education, anything like that? Or maybe you had some small business support prior to actually getting started if you are working with a chemist or if you were doing research. Maybe your brand launched out of research. So you each have had quite a well, I'm not actually sure about this, but I think that you guys have had slightly different paths, at least, for the success for your brand. So, how did you get to where you are? Is the ultimate question that I have for you. Brianne, would you like to start again?
Sure. I mean, if you'd asked me 10 years ago if I'd be running a beauty brand, I'd think you were crazy. I don't have a great deal of interest in the cosmetics world in terms of, I'm not one of those amazing people who can create beautiful makeup looks. So I just never saw myself in this industry. But I did I did a microbiology degree at university. And while I was in my first year, I realized how much I despised working for other people. I'm just an awful, awful employee. So it was struck me that if I wanted to have a good career, I'd probably have to do something myself. So I started my first business. So Atik is technically my third. I started my first business when I was 18, and it was just a normal, a standard cosmetics company. So liquid products and with no necessary sustainable leanings. It was really just playing with cosmetic chemistry, researching, and understanding a bit of business. I ran that for a couple of years and sold it. And whilst I was running that, I did start another business, which was a confectionery company, and ran them side by side alongside a university degree. So they both gave me a really good grounding, mainly in what not to do in business. I have very little interest in the financial side of things, which is a massive flaw. So now I know that I know that, so I've surrounded myself with people who are very good at it. But back then, I didn't have the resources to do that, so I kind of ignored them, and as a result, it became a bit of a struggle at some point. But they taught me a lot. I guess the biggest thing they taught me is what it is that people respond to when you're trying to talk to them, and that's the idea of a person behind a brand, a personality of the brand, authenticity and story and purpose, all which I've rolled into Atik and are absolutely the reasons for its success. We historically garnered a lot of press coverage, and I put that down to the fact that we have a really strong purpose. We want to rid the world of 500 million plastic bottles by 2030. And we have all of our other add-ons like B Corp and our charitable donations and so on and so forth. So there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of purpose behind the brand. And then there is the personal story that I really do believe has contributed to people resonating with the brand. And that has also been a really helpful part of attracting team members. I have the most amazing team. They are passionate and driven, and they will have completely variable skills and talents. They're all largely quite young, but they are what has made Atik the success. Business is nothing without people, and it seems to be forgotten a lot by a lot of business people, particularly in bigger businesses, of course. But if you know what, Atik stepped up and became a proper business back in 2016 when I hired my first COO, who basically taught me how to run a large scaling international business and the next sort of steps, because I was very much a baby CEO. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was playing around. So if I was to put it down to anything, Atik's success would be people and having that story that's built around a purpose.
Jen, would you like to go next?
Yeah, for sure. I think it is that story about a brand founder, and where our community feels like they're getting inside the life of something from the beginning to where we are now. So I've been pretty open and honest just about my own personal story and journey. I without having any experience in this space, I've made so many mistakes. I'm so open about not knowing at all what I'm doing. But again, surrounding yourself with just brilliant people that do know what they're doing in their roles. And so that's really, really what's made our brand successful, and that our will be completely clear that I think it's timing and where we are in this in history at this moment in Canada. There's a real reckoning happening with um, Indigenous history and our people, and in relation to how things could possibly be reconciled with the rest of the country. And so, not to get into any of those issues, but that's really been a powerful part of why I think people have paid attention to our brand, because we are Indigenous owned and operated. And a lot of the work we do supports Indigenous community. We've been open about how much we give back. It's always been the reason the brand was built. So this idea of supporting our communities through profit, and then just education in general, and what we can do to help and support our youth in that way. And then that, not only does our brand have a story, and then the brand founder, and we're really working on making our products have more of a story, and how people can connect with that. And that's really just using our Indigenous ways of knowing and being in terms of how we're making things. And so I feel like the world is just ready to see these kinds of things. And so I feel like that's certainly been huge and pivotal in the way that we've grown so quickly. And it goes back to timing, when launching in Sephora recently. It's their movement to be 15% BIPOC, like all of these things happening at the right moments. And then I really do think, when sometimes, I have to stand in front of investors, not only our current stakeholders, but ones that we hope to have in the future. And really, I find it hard to, I guess, toot your own horn, so to speak. But people ask, why are you the right person to do this? And I know, because of the passion that I personally have to make this succeed. It's based on pain, which is the loss of my brother. His suicide is definitely, it happened months before I launched the brand. And sadly, within our Indigenous communities, suicide is not uncommon. And so I literally have been purposefully working so hard, these extremely unsustainable hours that no human should work, but it's gotten us to where we are. And thankfully now, at this point of the brand, when I now have a team of people and marketing teams of people to help with things, I don't have to work as insatiable as I did in those first 3 years, while still working my full-time other job, because I wasn't paying myself anything yet. That has been the driving force to what has made our business successful.
In my case, I've had a kind of a fairly long, winded journey, all of which kind of, like Jen said earlier, it all kind of came together in terms of timing with the K team. I was in foods and beverages industry, worked for Danone, then moved into the tech space for about 10 years. The big point of inspiration being when Apple kind of launched the iPod, and it was music in motion for me. Like, wow, what they were kind of doing with music could be kind of rendered to every content, and that, especially the digital content, as the world kind of was pivoting towards. And that's what kind of got me to kind of create my first venture, which was about, and we filed several white papers and patents about re-indexing data points within digital data. And then from there, I kind of moved on to a very early version of Zoom, because somewhere you kind of saw the world, the whole shared economy and learnings becoming more and more kind of a key into the world we live in. And that kind of didn't kind of really work through. And while I was kind of doing that, my wife, Britta, she had a hair towel brand. And it was something fascinating to kind of find that the hair towel worked without adding anything to the hair. it was adding strength, it was giving shine, and it was kind of it was making hair feel more vibrant without adding anything to hair. And that's essentially what kind of got me to kind of looking into the into the biochemistry of hair, to realize what's it that kind of makes hair so different with this hair top. And that's where you realize that this whole routine of multiple products and toxic chemistry and a lot of heat stress, a lot of mechanical manipulation which you use when you express hair was not the sustainable path forward. And I remember at that point in time, I started kind of working on recombinant proteins, tissue engineering with one of the lead scientists who used to work for L'Oreal. And we came up with this entire kind of a set of sequences to strengthen hair from inside. At that point of time, I was in a conversation with a ex-CEO of a $80 billion company, and when he heard about what I was kind of doing, he kind of got one of the chief scientists to kind of come in and say, okay, can you kind of check out what this guy is saying is this bullshit? And literally the chief scientist of that company, an $80 billion global company, kind of told him, sir, this is impossible. And 8 months later, we actually had a patent in that space. Somewhere you realize that there has to be a sense of deep belief in what you're kind of doing. And that fundamentally can kind of re-architect industries. Look at it this way: the automobile industry was never transformed by someone from within. It took an outsider to do that. The same thing with the space industry. It took SpaceX to disrupt the space industry, not a Boeing or a Lockheed. Look at the hotel industry. It took an Airbnb. Or if you look at the mobility industry, it took an Uber or a Lyft to disrupt the industry. So, and that's where, as founders and as indie brands, we have the ability to kind of be outside of the box and come into industry with wherein we can bring our experiences and our learnings from several different verticals without having a mindset to a preconceived more assumption about how things work. And once we kind of bring that to the table, then it's basically inspiration. I mean, I get inspired every day by my team about I get challenged every day by my team to unwind, to uncouple my own thinking, and then kind of really kind of build up a whole kind of a whole new box. And that's what has been helping K18. In 12 months, if someone had asked us, would you launch a global brand with in focus on the salons and the stylists and be able to kind of do it in 12 months? The answer would have been no. But everything that I'd kind of done before, working on a digital platform for shared economy, working thinking outside of multi-product routines, and all of those kind of came together to help us actually kind of launch K18 in one of the most efficient and high impact ways. So that's been one of my, everything kind of all adds up and helps you build an amazing brand and inspire yourself and inspire the community.
Now I'm interested. Is there anything that you know now after so many years working in your brand, or maybe it's only been 1 year, which is really impressive. Is there anything that you know now that you wish you knew when you first got started on your journey creating a brand? Brianne, do you want to start this again? Sorry, I'm boring. I just go in the same order every single time, but I'll keep doing it. Brianne, do you want to go first?
Predictability is great. Look, there's loads of things. I was naive and very inexperienced when I started Etique. I had no idea what I was doing, and to be frank, I feel that way most of the time now. I guess some big things I wish I had known was that it was okay to trust my gut, and that if someone who was, in my opinion, much more experienced or had had a lot more, had done a lot more stuff and was telling me something that fundamentally against what I felt was right, it was okay to say no to that advice. And it is in general okay to have mentors get advice and say no to that advice within reason, obviously. That's okay. I wish I'd known how important keeping an eye on your finances was. And that, look, it sounds really stupid because obviously that's key, but I almost thought it would take care of itself, I suppose. And obviously it doesn't. And it can lead you into a lot of trouble. And as much as I'm not interested in the finance side of things, if you want to create change and be a genuinely impactful business, you have to be financially sustainable. And then I guess the third thing is conventional wisdom is not necessarily wise. I have been told millions of times how operating a business in the way I want to operate the business is wrong. I've been told that you need a massive board from sort of day one. I've been told that you can't raise money the way I've raised money. I've been told so many things that you shouldn't do this because that's not how a real business operates. And our success would indicate that that's completely untrue. The idea that business is only doable one way is disproven around the world consistently, and yet for some reason people will still come out with these old ideas that you have to do it this way and this way and this way and this way, and if you deviate from that you will fail. And that's a shame because it squelches a lot of that creativity that entrepreneurs have. So it's really important that you speak to a whole bunch of people. You get lots of outside perspectives, but then you think about it yourself and think, does that resonate with what I want to do? Does it resonate with how I feel this can go? And then take a step and give it a go. And if it doesn't work, you can easily change something quickly. But I guess what I'm saying is just because someone is telling you something and they sound like they know everything, they don't necessarily know what's best for your business. I made a lot of stupid decisions early in the piece because I didn't trust myself. I wasted a lot of money because I didn't trust myself. And had I done, look, who knows where Atik would be now? And I'm not saying that ultimately it wasn't for the best, but perhaps I could have saved myself a bit of pain if I had been brave enough to back my own decisions.
Jen, would you like to go next?
Yeah, so I think for me personally would be in the realization that there is a lot of capital out there and available. And the only reason I think that if this was because I know what I know now that I wish that I knew this earlier would have been I would have started my brand the way we transformed ourselves this last year. We would have started that way versus having this offering from a private labeler and then switching sort of, a couple years in. However, early on, I had no money to do this and just a couple $100. And so really found the best products that I could find at that moment in time and got a logo on them and started selling them. But it was a great way for me to test the market. So I always struggle with this question because I feel like I've learned so much from not doing things the way that I would have known and can do them now. So that would be the one major for me for sure. It's just realizing it's actually remarkable. And I talk to young entrepreneurs now and constantly share that there's so much capital out there and available. It's just finding the right people to connect you to the right people to find the right things in order, especially when you have an idea that's different from what the world has already seen.
And then Suveen.
For me, two things. One is the power of focus and the power of response. To kind of put this into perspective, it was 2008. There was a financial crisis in US, and I had just kind of moved over to US. I had a tech business. We had about 300 people, about 3 different divisions, and we started kind of losing clients out there. And I was trying to kind of keep everything kind of together. It was trying to kind of save all the 3 divisions rather than kind of trying to kind of save the one that would have the that would make the biggest impact in terms of the future. And as a result, the entire business imploded. So I was kind of back to kind of a square one. And when in 2020 the pandemic happened, it was another crisis of a similar nature. And for once, the learning that look, focus is not just about what you do, it's also about how you allocate your resources. That focus actually kind of helped us in 2020 survive in the other part of our business when half of our retail was out, was, we lost about half of retail. Yet in the same month of April, by the end of April, we had the highest performing month in the entire history of the company. How do you accomplish that? It was simply about what focus can do. We focused on the one thing that that would have the biggest impact. For example, in the hair towel industry, when color became, at home color started growing, and we created a partnership with one of the large color companies, and that helped us sail through that. Whereas previously, all I was doing is how best to allocate resources among the three businesses. So that was my first biggest learning. The other one is, when crises happen, we tend to react. It's about how do you survive through a crisis, and that's what I was doing in 2008 when it happened. When 2020 came, for the first time, I learned two things. One is trusting your team, and B is learning the power of response. We responded to a crisis, and when you respond to a crisis, things dramatically change. It's like magic. You realize that this is not about just a surviving through a crisis. If there's a crisis, you need to shine through a crisis. If you're shining through a crisis, it's going to ensure your survival. And if you survive through that, you're going to thrive. So that whole feeling of, look, we're not just be sheltering in and try to survive, see through this pandemic, but actually be bold enough to to shine through this pandemic. That changed the whole destiny of what we are doing. And those are the two big learnings. And when I look at 10 years back, how I would respond to how I reacted to such a crisis and how I did it 10 years later. So those would be the two big learnings for me.
And I have two more questions for you guys before I open up the questions to the audience. For the audience, if you have questions, there is a little hand at the bottom of your screen that you can raise your hand and come up to the stage and ask our panelists questions directly. Or if you don't feel comfortable with that, you can put your questions in the webinar chat text channel, and then I will ask them after the next two questions that I have. So my next question is, for someone aspiring to launch an indie brand, do you have any recommendations, just general recommendations for them?
If you want to launch an indie brand, what are you trying to do that's different to everything else in the market? And it's got to be something that is actually different from the consumer's perspective. So I love doing mentoring, not just within the industry, but I speak to a lot of founders who are trying to create new businesses, and it's fascinating. And when I ask them the question, why would a consumer or a customer buy your product versus a competitor? Only about 50% of them can tell me why. If you're launching a business and you don't know what's different from what else is already out in the market, how is your customer going to possibly tell? So you need to be different. I personally believe a business should have a purpose. It should be something beyond, just lining the shareholders' pockets. It's just easier to market. It's easier to gain customer loyalty, and frankly, it helps you get out of bed in the morning because I don't believe money is that much of a motivator for most people. But you've got to have that difference. You've got to have a purpose beyond money. It doesn't have to be some grandiose purpose. It can be anything. Those have got to be able to stand alone to bring people into your company. There's no point just saying, I want to create a new moisturizer. What's different about that? You've got to stand out. It's an incredibly crowded marketplace. And a lot of these sort of niches are taken now. So how are you going to be different? And that can be a very difficult question.
Jen, what do you think?
Yeah, super similar. Now, I've always literally, I'm really honest when I say, if I knew what I knew now, I probably would not have started this business because it is extremely crowded, extremely competitive. And if you're just, I've been open in saying that the world did not need another lipstick brand, but it did need one that represented Indigenous faces and stories and really, for so long for us in our communities, we've had non-Indigenous people telling Indigenous stories, talking about, the supporting of Indigenous communities and farmers, and how they're supporting them by doing all these things. And the world has not had an Indigenous brand come and actually do that work. And so, in many ways, we're all highly insulted by that, because we feel that we should be the ones to be telling our stories and sharing our truths and our plant wisdom and medicines with the world, not non-Indigenous brands. And so that didn't exist, I think, on a large scale. If I am, after the research, when I started, there were Indigenous brands, but they wasn't a lot of like e-commerce businesses, not anything that was, I think, prepared or even priced correctly to ever go to have different distribution channels. And so we feel that that's the role that we could fill. And so anyone who's interested in entering the space, much like Brianne said, it has to be so different, and that's really hard right now. So I would, your differentiating factor, the reason why someone comes, and your reason why as an entrepreneur you're doing the business, has to be so vastly great and purposeful. One, to keep driving you to do the work, and second, to even keep the interest of the audience alive and going. And getting market attention is really easy for a short period of time, but how do you create that for the long term? And so thinking about those things really early on is really important.
Jen kind of defined it quite correctly when she said, getting market attention for a short period of time is easy, but sustaining it over a long period of time is one of the biggest challenges. And that's where just kind of getting into an industry and not taking a very objective look at what you kind of are doing and why you kind of are doing it. The why is super critical. As brands, we need to have a mission. If that mission needs to kind of go beyond fundamentally about selling, or kind of having a marketing or a backstory to it, to actually kind of doing something meaningful. And that, for example, in the case of K18, our entire lens to the world was about making a stylist's life easier. So when it came to kind of a K18, this was not just about, I'm going to help you with radical transformation of expression. But if I can't do that without reducing some of the frustration, without saving them time, then K18 has no purpose. So you have to kind of look at the mission in a much larger sense, and your product promise and your brand promise has to kind of really kind of stand up to that promise. That's the first most important thing. The number two is transparency is not just about, I'm going to tell you about my ingredients around clean beauty. It's transparency is about data points. What are the data points you bring to the table which help enhance the trust? And and today, while, for example, let's say the clean beauty movement, it's been there for a while, and you now our communities are asking us, show me the data points which actually kind of demonstrate that your product kind of works in that situation and it's the most optimal. So it's not just about, show me you have 5 ingredients, show me the point that, wow, how your product makes a difference to 15 other products which may have the same promise. So really kind of looking at that in a sense of granularity is key. The third part is how do you kind of really sustain scaling up? Having the right scaling hook is super critical for a business, because you can get somebody's attention for a few months, for a year, but to be able to kind of scale up a business into 3 years and 5 years and make something meaningful, build a meaningful brand, you need to kind of have an inherent scaling hook. It could be your product, it could be the way you market. For example, if you look at Glossier, how they built up the community, they created an inherent scaling hook. So if you're not kind of thinking about that social scaling hook, which has to kind of go beyond just performance marketing. In US, in the last couple of years, digital performance marketing has been a big buzzword. But we know it. Not most of the digital businesses ever kind of stayed profitable even after 5 years of scaling up. Whereas when you kind of look at China, you have a very sophisticated digital ecosystem. So how do you kind of really kind of go beyond the obvious to actually understand what works for your brand and how you're going to leverage to scale it up? If you don't kind of get that right, you may have a great start, but you can't really sustain it. So as a founder, you have to kind of look at all these three things. What's the scaling hook? What's your mission? And C is, how are you constantly kind of looking at data points to support your promise, not just with the community, but in terms of what works, what doesn't work, and do course correction in real time.
And now, just to add this in, because not everyone in the audience maybe wants to launch an indie brand, but maybe they want to work for one. So, is there anything specific that indie brands may be looking for in employees, especially like some of their first employees, that might be different than a larger brand? Brianne, do you want to start this one again?
Sure. Well, attitude. Yes, everyone goes on about experience, and absolutely experience is very helpful, but if you have the wrong attitude, it doesn't matter anyway. So we hire still for attitude first and foremost, whether someone understands that a more entrepreneurial organization is not a corporate. There are very few similarities. There is, I've said it before, we all wear many hats on occasion. Things can come up and all of a sudden we all have to, I don't know, pop down to the warehouse and help out or whatever. It's not as chaotic as it was in the early days, but in the early days, everybody helped everybody do everything. And it was fun largely, but it was also stressful. So you have to hire for attitude. I'm always looking for people who are generally optimistic. They've got to have some kind of value resonance with what we're doing. Otherwise, they're simply not going to be motivated because they're not motivated by the same values that the company is and the rest of the team is. And that's fine. Everybody wants different things, but you want to have some kind of value alignment. And then I guess there's the motivation or the get up and go. Again, it's totally fine. This largely does depend on the role or the position that you're hiring for, but ambitious people are. It's important to have ambitious people in the right roles because they quite often want to move and go either laterally or be promoted quicker. And that is super useful in the right roles. So it does depend what you're hiring for, but the number one most important thing I'd say is attitude, positivity, willing to get stuck in and try things, and understanding that there isn't the safety net or the big resource structure underneath in what may be a corporate. So there's no legal department or HR department that might be there to help. You've got to be keen to get in there and figure things out a little bit yourself.
Jen, what do you think?
Yeah, for me, the tough part has been getting the right people, and it is not always about that skill or experience. I've learned that that attitude, as Brian mentioned, is super important, and so I'm like constantly, I think, asking more questions around those softer skills and the type of people that they are, about their character, and so that for us is really, really important. And then they fit in with the culture that we're trying to create. Even though we're a really, really small team, we do have a culture, and we've based the structure and the foundation of Cheekbone Beauty on the 7 grandfather teachings, which comes from my Anishinaabe heritage. And so how they fit in and work within the culture that we're trying to create. And I think it was mentioned that having fun and all those things are really important, and that, really looking for people who have the entrepreneurial spirit and are pretty scrappy and can figure things out. And so, it's probably been about a 50-50 shot here every time that we've hired. But the ones that are the right person for Cheekbone are definitely entrepreneurial in spirit, and just get stuff done. I'm always just like so over the moon and excited when somebody new comes on board, and it's like just things that they're already doing within the first couple of weeks, and not asking for permission almost either to do everything, because we're so small that we don't have time for that all the time. So I would be encouraged to tell anyone looking for a job at either with a startup or in a corporate setting. I think that entrepreneurial spirit is really important, that you're just a person who's interested in being creative and getting things done and will do every and anything. And I'm here at Cheekbone on Sundays because I'm the one that still comes and cleans the building on the weekends, because we just haven't hired a cleaning staff yet. And I actually don't mind it personally. I'm weird like that. I love cleaning, and it's my time to just get ready for the week beforehand. But yeah, all of us do just about everything.
And finally, Suveen.
When you kind of every startup literally is defying gravity every day till it kind of till it breaks free of the gravity and kind of then builds up its own momentum and with that sustains its lift. And if you kind of if you look at that, you want to kind of look at people. For me, it's the most important one is inspiration. I want to be inspired by everyone I work with, especially the team at the top. Because if they can inspire me, they can inspire the heck out of everyone else out there. And number two is ownership. As a startup, there's nothing like, hey, this is your silo. We all kind of work together. We all need kind of all we kind of are doing is we complement our skills and to deliver the best outcomes. And that's the only thing that fuels and fuels a startup at all levels, which means that when I kind of look at an organization hierarchy, the org chart, I never made an org chart for the first before K18 for Arcus. I never made an org chart for about 5 years. I hated looking at an org chart because the moment I would look at an org chart, I would see silos, and that's not how you kind of see a team. It's not. I get inspiration from someone who may be in ops, may actually bring in the most insightful data points when it comes to performance marketing, for example, or someone in product management may actually have a substantial insight to offer in social media or education. So how do the champions, who make the organization, how are they constantly kind of looking at everyone within the team as 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 talented people who come in with a set of skills, not as marketing, social, education, ops. The more we can kind of take that out of the context and focus on what the skill sets are bringing, and then how do you leverage those. What's the primary purpose of the skill set, and how best you can leverage the secondary skill set that everyone kind of brings. Then you can build up an organization that's kind of that flows with the desired outcomes. Otherwise, you constantly kind of it's like you constantly kind of struggling to respond or react to environment. And that this is what I kind of see the single biggest kind of a gift that as leaders we kind of we can help with build up an organization that inspires every one of us at every step level. I mean, my team challenges me every day, and I feel I have no apology. I mean, I never even once felt apologetic about what I don't know or if I've been wrong. And the ability to kind of create where we can together create an environment that allows us to be super transparent, that allows us to kind of not be kind of a focus on personalities, but build up outcomes as a team that the one that inspires internally and the one that can inspire and the community. There's no difference between an internal organization and an external organization. It's one. And the more we kind of as a team realize that, the more it helps us kind of stay one in the context of a larger community.
Now, we got a really great question from Lazy Panda, who asks, what do the panelists think is the role of indie brands to science communication or misinformation, and what do they want their role to be in the future? Brianne, do you want to go first again?
Sorry, I was just behind the mute button. Unmute. It's a good question, and it has, I guess, lots of facets to it. Personally, from day one, I have always wanted Etique to provide the correct information and to ensure that we don't market from a place of fear. Now, that is harder than you might imagine because as an indie brand, we are fighting with every other indie brand out there. Some of them who are doing what we're doing and trying to put out correct information, some who are incorrectly putting out, or who are unknowingly putting out incorrect information, which is probably the majority of them, and some who are far, far fewer who are on purpose doing it to sell more product. I believe the vast majority of indie brands are absolutely trying to do the right thing, for sure. But it's tricky because founders and CEOs are all coming from different places in terms of their previous experience and their expertise, and they're relying on experts who may not be experts in the field they pretend they say to be. It's actually very complicated. So speaking for Etique, it's important to me that we are putting out information that we believe to be correct and based on the latest studies. So I have taught the people within my team the basics of how to read, understand, and analyze a study. And it's whatever we put out is always fact-checked. However, of course, I'm not saying that we're ever perfect, and we may well put out something wrong. And if we do, we will always apologize. And I believe it's really, really important that all brands do this, in particular indie brands, because you get customers who are absolute diehard fans. It's really nice because you are a smaller business, and you do tend to be purpose-led. You have fans who are absolute diehard fans. So it's really important that what you put out is correct, because people tend to believe you more than they do a corporate, because there's almost this inbuilt disbelief of what a corporate says. It's, it's like authority or whatever. I think as a whole, the industry is moving to a better place, due in large part to people like you that are calling them out and expressing the correct information. And I think that will only be a trend that continues to grow. So brands that aren't doing it are going to be forced to do it soon because they've just been called out more and more for it. So yeah, I think it's a collective responsibility within the industry and science communicators who are doing such a good job holding people to holding brands to account.
Jen, what do you think?
Yeah, this is so challenging. Those community advocates that you have that are like your diehard fans, man, do they get everything mixed up and wrong. They say and put it's such a challenge to market to people that don't know anything about technically, I think they don't know anything about like sustainability or science, and those are just blanket words for a whole bunch of different things. And then even experts that we work with, there's different viewpoints that, extremely educated sustainability experts as well as educated scientists and chemists, and even their viewpoints differ. So the layman or regular consumer, I'm frustrated with them, I'm frustrated for them, because there is so much misinformation. So at Cheekbone Beauty as a brand, we're doing the best we can with the knowledge that we have, and of course if we make a mistake, we're open and honest about it. It's just such a hard place to be in. I feel like, we actually express to our circles that the larger corporations actually have, they should not fear them as a consumer, because they're probably doing things a lot safer and better than a lot of indie brands. I'm in disagreement with Brian, because I feel like a lot of indie brands, I don't know if they're all well intended, to be perfectly honest. I don't know, in terms of good conscience, how a lot of people can sell things having no idea where they come from. And that's what's happening in the space. There's I just every day notice there's 1,000,001 new cosmetic palettes that are available online, and if you ask anybody about ingredients, and many of them don't even list ingredients on their websites, but they all have their own own twist or market to grab. And it's unfortunate because an average consumer doesn't know a lot about what they're purchasing. And so I just feel like we're in a really, really tough space in the e-commerce world, because there's no one policing this space.
I would agree with Jen when she especially kind of called out that not everything corporates do is wrong, and I think this is where the indie a lot of the indie brands as a category, we need to do a lot better than what we kind of doing. A lot of us are driven by kitchen chemistry. Kitchen chemistry is not science. Opinions are not facts. Most of the corporates do a lot more testing, the RIPD testing, the safety testing, which I can't imagine indie brands investing their resources on those. Also, just because having ingredients or having a certain set of ingredients, that does not translate into efficacy. I could kind of create ashwagandha in my hair wash. Does it really help my hair? No. And in a lot of indie brand as an industry has been capitalizing on this fair. We need to kind of a change. We need to while we have a right intention, the key thing is we need to participate and play a key role and a responsible role in building up a data-driven, a fact-driven category. Otherwise, all we kind of feeding out there online are opinions and kitchen chemistry, and that can work and kind of weave that in with marketing stories. It can work for a short time, but ultimately it has implications for a community. For example, we all talk about gentle washing of hair. If I'm using a lot of styling products in my hair, no gentle washing is going to help my hair. So and eventually what happens is you have buildup in the hair and then you have a hair loss. So as indie brands, we need to kind of focus a lot more on science, on testing, on data, efficacy, and relevance. And in that, there's a lot to kind of learn from the corporates, yet kind of retained our entrepreneurship and use our thinking and our brilliance to really kind of push the boundaries further and help our community along the way. Otherwise, we're working at cross purposes with our community.
Yeah, and I have to wonder about the challenges presented kind of externally from brands. For example, everyone now has to fit in the Clean at Sephora box. Not only for Sephora, like all the different retailers have these different standards based off of the EWG has gained so much traction. Misinformation seems, this is a pessimistic view, but looking around at the industry for what new brands have to fit into the box for, it's generally based off of misconceptions. So like the challenges for indie brands contending with what consumers and industry want, coupled with most of the industry conferences that I go to are at the end of the day at some point misinforming the industry. There's like a few exceptions. There's a few conferences that I wouldn't say that's the case, but then there are conferences that they're giving platforms to people that don't have a background in the subject at hand, and then giving indie brands blatant misinformation about product safety, a messaging around what makes sense for sustainability, where it's not actually in line with reality. I see this very often, and it's it's a bit of a bugbear for mine. So I would be interested to hear your 2 cents on this for the external factors impacting you guys from, I guess, ethically navigating the cosmetics industry. While you may have this intention, what consumers and industry, I guess, expect of you, how that may impact that intention, if it has any impact or if it makes it harder. Brianne, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, It does make it harder, actually. Clean beauty, as we know, is nonsense. And toxin-free and chemical-free is the most irritating thing. And it is, of course, complete nonsense. But unfortunately, retailers don't know that. So as a brand that doesn't have the clout of, say, Procter & Gamble or whoever, doesn't have the finances to buy shelf space, we do have to fit in more with what retailers demand. And a good example is sulfates, right? It's almost always removed from these clean beauty lists because people are terrified of sulfates when there's absolutely no proof they have cause any issues at all. They're very efficient cleansers and can be just as mild when formulated correctly. So it is difficult. And I have on occasion, I tend to stop doing it now, but I've had arguments or gentle discussions where I've explained the science behind ingredients and why they are not the concern that they think they are with buyers. But unfortunately, at the end of the day, that doesn't tend to go anywhere because these buyers are not the ones who make these decisions anyway. So yes, there's also marketing, and consumers' perceptions that you have to battle with every day. I mean, we do get the questions, are your products chemical free? And I absolutely refuse. And my wonderful customer service team know that we can never say, oh yes, there is, they're full of this and that and magic sparkle dust and so on, and avocado juice or whatever. We try and educate our consumers and say, hey, there's no such thing as this. But by and large, that doesn't contend with the constant misinformation out there. They just don't believe you over something like the EWG. I choose to believe that things like the EWG have positive, they're trying to come from a place of doing good. I just think that they are doing massive, massive bad. And to the point that Jen and Savine made about corporates, corporates do have this perception for being evil, and it's completely unfair because they do have greater resources to do more good. They invest far more in research to phase out animal testing, for example. But this is not the public perception of them. So it's definitely something you battle with. We try and fight it with, practicality, science, proof. But I'll be honest, I don't know if we're winning very often.
Jen, what do you think?
Yeah, I feel like it's exhausting, the battle, when you want to differentiate yourself as a brand and to be doing things in a more sustainable way. And, when it comes to the ingredients, and I always use the quotes in the clean world because, we're dealing with the Sephoras of the world, and that's how their lists and how their teams operate. And there's no way that, and like, we're not going to change how they operate. And I think it's only going to get worse, to be honest, by the sounds of our conversations with the merchandising teams, and because they don't have the, I guess, the scientific background to have the right information just as individuals on all of their teams, and they're such a massive company. And then you have Credo Beauty, who, and part of an accelerator program that they offer. And what's interesting is it's like the drive to want to do things differently, but then it just perpetuates, like, as we've discussed, all of this misinformation. And even on their list, I had a conversation with I think it's like their corporate sustainability, or I was listening to something that a podcast that she was talking on, and it's the whole, the petroleum based ingredients, and how, when our team is looking at the research, it's actually using the byproduct of that industry. So I would think that that is a sustainable option, and it's one of the ingredients in our mascara. So I'm like, so they wouldn't list that, I guess, according to their no item or no ingredient lists, right? And I was like, I'm ready to challenge them on that conversation if we were to ever go into their stores, because like, the clean and sustainable categories are two separate things, but then where do we draw lines, and what choice is better in the end, right? So it's exhausting. Our customer service team, same, gets such an enormous amount of questions in our DMs. It's like are you non-toxic? Are you chemical free? And I'm just, it's exhausting. It's truly exhausting to have to try to answer them. Of course, we've created template after template with, paragraphs and paragraphs of answers. So it's trying to explain and educate, and, we'll just keep trying to do the best that we can with what we have.
I kind of share both Brianna and Jen's kind of sentiments about this. When it comes to Sephora, they've had kind of launch their clean beauty and all. They've been forced to. The reality at the end of the day is the number of interest groups and the number of misinformation that's out there. Kind of it has a cascading effect, and it's kind of forcing even some of the biggest retailers in the world to kind of to take steps which they know internally, is not in kind of a sync with the best interests of the community. When we talk about ingredients, I mean, even a turmeric at a certain level of concentration can be toxic to a human system. So the question is there's a difference, first of all, between the ingredients and the formulation. B is ingredients don't just mean efficacy. So, for example, when Brianna spoke about sulfates, sulfates are the only way to kind of clean, for example, when it comes to hair properly. And yet we have vilified sulfates like anything. Same goes with the case, for example, silicones. Silicones impact on the skin barrier versus when it comes to you. We all want that bouncy hair, which is not stuck together, and all of that. Silicones are the only way to kind of give you that hair experience. Yet we have vilified silicones like crazy. So somewhere we had to kind of get collectively to be a lot more responsible. In our case, for example, we have alcohol in K18, and alcohol is such a vilified thing. It's going to dry your hair. People don't know anything about biochemistry, and they don't know anything about most of in the community don't know anything about their hair in the first place. Do they know about what are the different kinds of crystalline structures of keratin inside the hair and why you kind of need alcohol? They just kind of look at it as one category. So we kind of, for example, with K18, we upfront. If you look up our FAQs, the first one is, hey, why is there alcohol in K18? This is the reason, and this is what's the purpose it serves. But you're kind of forced to kind of do that simply because of this misinformation, and that ultimately kind of needs to kind of change as indie brands and interest groups, whether you have these EWGs of the world who created their own kind of benchmarks about what's toxic, what's not toxic. I don't want to kind of comment on the scientific basis beyond the point, but we need to take a lot more responsibility towards sharing facts with our community and helping them make decisions that are in the best interests, not just simply churning out misinformation and capitalizing on the fear.
I feel like we could go on a whole rabbit hole with this one question. But we've been now talking for over an hour and a bit. So I'll ask my final question, which is, do you have any final take-homes that you'd like to leave our audience with? Brianne, would you like to go first again?
Just for a change. Final take homes. If you want to start a business, you know what, go for it. Take the first step. If you are worried about what to do and how to actually start a business, do something small. Whether it's register your company name, or I don't know, even decide on a company name. The question I get so many times is, how do you start a business? Take that first step, because that is the overwhelming one. So it's a little bit like going to the gym. The worst bit of going to the gym is actually driving to the gym or whatever. So you've got to take that first step, because that then gives you the confidence to do the next one and break it down to little tiny pieces until you get to where you want to. If you want to work within an indie company, I think we've all said something very similar in terms of attitude, entrepreneurial thought, giving it a go. If that isn't something that resonates with you, if you want something a bit more structured, possibly an indie beauty brand isn't for you. But if it is, take advantage of what could be a really incredible opportunity, and reach out to founders and CEOs and see where you get to. But at the end of the day, I've always been a a big proponent of go out and give something a go. Just don't put it all on the line. Don't risk everything you have if you're in that situation. Just take that first step, but don't make it catastrophic if it doesn't work.
And Jen?
Yeah, if someone's interested and has like this insatiable passion to go out and do something, whatever it is, I always say if you don't have that you would wake up at 3 a.m. and do it for free, then I don't think there's enough passion behind it, because I personally needed that much passion to prove to myself to keep doing this, because it's certainly not easy. Surround yourself with networks and just incredibly brilliant people that can help guide you and direct you. And those networks will uplift you, and they will be your support systems when you need it. And it's okay to make mistakes. I feel like we live in a world with so much cancel culture and hatred happening that it really pushes people not to want to go out and do something, but don't let any of that stop you.
Uh, a startup and building a business is defying gravity every day. So you got to be intrinsically comfortable with defying gravity literally every day of your life. It's a kind of a shoe dog day. If any of you kind of read the Nike founders book, so I think that's number one. You got to be super comfortable with that, and that's what's going to fuel your passion, your ability to work, and your ability to kind of build a brand or a business. Number two is keeping a close watch on the finances. Every time when we kind of start a business, the next thing we kind of look at, how do we raise capital? For 4 years I struggled, and I would make 500 pitches to raise capital. What I kind of realized was, if you're focused on to building an amazing brand and a business, capital seeks you out. With K18, we've had 7 or 8 of the top fee funds seeking us out. We've had some of the biggest strategics in the world seeking us out. That's because we are focused on building our community, and we didn't have many resources yet, and we launched it in the most challenging period. But I think that's a big learning. We always start kind of thinking, how do we raise capital? Then the next round of capital, take that out of the context, have the community as a North Star. Number three, and therefore keeping that the financial fuel alive is and keeping it going is important. And that needs to kind of keep in where you essentially kind of looking at every dollar every day. You kind of course correcting yourself every day. I think that's important. Third is be real. I mean, yes, our passion, our enthusiasm is what builds up the business, but at the same time, our ability to kind of look into the mirror every day and say, okay, what's it that I need to course correct about myself? And what's it that I need to course correct about the organization that I'm building? And being able to do it the next day, not 3 months later, is important, because each of those help things. It's like having a sailboat out there in a storm. Your tick and tack of how you kind of with the winds, and keep yourself on the North Star is what helps really keep the sailboat moving forward. There are no power turbines that's going to help the sailboat and come dramatically away. So you always need to kind of focus on, how do I keep the wind, how do I keep the tailwind kind of supporting me, rather than constantly being in the headwinds. So if we can kind of do that, I think we all have opportunities to build amazing brands and inspire communities.
I think that's a great point to end this conversation and our whole careers a day. We got started at 9 a.m. Yeah, so thank you so much. Thank you so much to our panelists, all of our panelists here, and then our panelists all throughout the day, for agreeing to donate your time and expertise to this event. Thank you to all of our audience members who've been so engaged throughout the day. I hope you've learned a lot. I know I certainly have. And yeah, thank you. This whole conversation is going to be up on our YouTube notes channel, as well as on our blog, in, I'd say, probably within 2 hours. So stay tuned for that. But big thank you to our panelists for joining in this conversation.